Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today's Microsoft Marketplace community event. My name is Justin Royal, and I'm the Marketplace community lead for the Marketplace community. We've got a great session planned for you today on Inside Azure IP Co-sell, what high-performing software development companies do differently. Just a few notes before we get started. This is the partner-focused community event, and it will be available on demand in the Marketplace community after today's show. We certainly hope that you can join us live, but if you're not able to join us live, this recording will be available in the community after today's show. Throughout today's show, we certainly encourage you to type your questions into the chat. We will have time for a live Q&A at the end of today's show. If you're watching after today's show ends and you do have questions, we certainly encourage you to post your questions in the Marketplace community discussion board. We have a whole series of these events for partners within Microsoft Marketplace community. I definitely encourage you to join the community if you're not a member already. We have a whole library of events relevant for partners who are just getting started on Marketplace or are at any stage of their journey on the Marketplace. And with that being said, I will introduce our speaker for today. Today we have Barbara Treviño from Labra. And Barbara will be taking it from here in terms of sharing tips and tricks on Azure IP Co-sell. And again, welcome your questions throughout the chat. And Barbara, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone, or howdy, partners. My name is Barbara Treviño. You guys can call me BT. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, Inside Azure IP Co-sell and what high-performing SDCs do differently. Let's go ahead and kick things off. Today, a little bit about myself. If you want to know a little bit about me, a subject matter expert, I have been in this space for quite some time. I know my girlish looks don't look it, but I've been in the industry for 10 years now, supporting go-to-market teams and how they partner better with these hyperscalers, of which Marketplace, co-sell, all of those operations are part of that process. So I've been in the space for 10 years and I've been supporting sales, partner operations, alliances, enablement, and cloud marketplaces for a very, very long time, which has led me to successfully help companies, a lot of software development companies, trying to understand the nuances of becoming a partner, a successful partner in and around all of the ecosystems, whether that be AWS, Google, or my personal favorite, Microsoft. So I've been in and around the industry for a while. I've seen it from the inside out, and I have seen great success. And part of the reason why I'm here is because what really helps and inspires me is to help scale companies and see their success realized with these hyperscalers, and not just do the basics, not just get listed, not just do the bare bones, but actually really accelerate in the ecosystem. And so today I'm going to share some tips and tricks that I've learned over the last few years, over the last few companies, and how to also help you guys get ready and prepared to your pathway and journey to success. It all starts really with revenue, right? At the end of the day, partnerships are a strategic organization, and it can be really hard to justify the value of partnerships. And the way we justify partnerships is through attribution and contribution. And when I mean contribution, it really means co-selling, right? Because we know that attribution is partner sourced pipeline. And instead of getting into the hairy contribution section, we know that at the end of the day, revenue is the most important part. Now, we know when we're working with the hyperscalers, it can be a little hard to work with them and to unlock revenue generating opportunities with their teams. So the reality is, while many companies focus on having partners generate and source pipeline, when it comes to the hyperscalers, revenue things that help your business accelerate is really co-sell. And co-sell isn't just a badge that your team gets for being successful. When done properly, it can really accelerate your journey with Microsoft. So when you are thinking about revenue, don't just think about sourced pipeline. SDCs, or software development companies, are also thinking about their co-sell strategies. And co-sell is actually what helps unlock more revenue, more opportunities. And we have seen success has proven that when you're working and co-selling with a Microsoft field seller, you are going to have a higher probability of winning that deal. In fact, 3 to 4 times higher than you would if you were doing it alone. And so when you are working with a hyperscaler, it's important to unlock that engagement, to be able to effectively co-sell, because by having that communication, that alignment, and understanding that when you unlock that revenue avenue, that pathway to success, that can lead to having more reach across your business when you are extending into the Microsoft field rep ecosystem as well. There's thousands of Microsoft sellers globally, and it is their responsibility to help you activate that pipeline. But you have to do it effectively, right? It doesn't happen naturally, and that's partly why I'm having this conversation, because there's a lot of different things that you can do along the journey in your pathway and maturity to unlock success. And when you do this successfully, when you reach all of the milestones of co-sell, which is, of course, in Microsoft's world, IP co-sell eligibility, that will unlock MAC eligibility, which ultimately is what's going to help your end customers as well be able to draw down on that pre-committed spend, that Azure spend, that MAC agreement, right? So to set the stage, we know that working with hyperscalers is very, very important, but we do know that the reality of working with them isn't source pipeline, it's co-selling. And co-selling will help you activate the field and get you more success and much faster. So to also kind of elaborate and demystify some of these things, what is IP co-sell? I know it's a term that is uncommon or not something that many SDCs are used to hearing, especially if they're just starting their journey with Microsoft. It's one of those things that you've heard about, but you don't quite understand or know what really happens in IP co-sell once you achieve it. But it's really Microsoft's way to help you, and it's their program to help you effectively activate and mature your co-sell practice with Microsoft field sellers, right? So it's one thing to get listed on Marketplace, because we know, if you see right here on the right side, that is part of the requirement, but that's not all of it. To become IP co-sell eligible, what you're really doing is making sure that your solution is viable, that your solution can consume Azure resources. Therefore, it can unlock variable compensation for Microsoft field sellers. So now they are not only incentivized to work with you, but they themselves can work successfully with you and jointly co-sell. But there's a specific way that you have to do it, right? By doing it, of course, you're going to get access to the pipeline. And by that, I mean, once you start actively co-selling with Microsoft, you will be able to have a little bit more visibility on what's going on in the account, understanding the inside information to help steer the conversation better. But to really effectively implement IP co-sell across your organization, you have to be very strategic. So it's one thing to know what IP co-sell is. The second thing is to really activate it. And so I do want to talk about what IP co-sell is not, right? Before we even get on the activation piece, I want you guys to remember something, because over my last 10 years of doing this, IP co-sell can sometimes be a buzzword, right? A lot of SDCs that are working with Microsoft for the first time hear this. It might be a buzzword, but it's not just one of those things that you think about. It's not one of those check boxes as a part of the process as you start working with Microsoft and getting that IP co-sell eligibility check mark or anything. This is really the start of the journey, right? It's not something that you have to set and forget and know that it's just going to naturally going to happen. It's not you guys completing a series of checklists just to accomplish this, right? This is really just the starting line, right? Any SDC that is working with Microsoft should be very prepared to know what's going to happen after you activate IP co-sell. And that's really where the magic happens. So SDCs that are planning their journey with Microsoft, not just understand what IP co-sell is, but also understand that it is not just a task. It's not just something that they're going to get done and accomplish. This is just the carrot, right? This is just the beginning, because once you achieve IP co-sell, that's truly where your business can really start activating. But it's important that you activate, right? It's not something that you just accomplish and forget, because that's honestly what changes your acceleration in your journey thereafter, right? And so one of the things that really is important when you're working through your IP co-sell journey, there's really two gates, because I don't want this experience to scare you. I think when SDCs go through this process for the first time, it's kind of an afterthought, right? You're very preoccupied getting listed. You're trying to understand your journey, how you want to market your solution, how you want to potentially get more top of funnel opportunities. And then later you think about, oh my gosh, I should probably get IP co-sell eligible, so that way my end customers can burn down their Mac on their Mac, right? But at the end of the day, you have to think about this holistically. You have to think about this strategically. You have to think about this early on, because this is a part of your overall business strategy, because alliances tends to sit in a very specific part of the business that doesn't get a lot of love, because it's really hard to understand. And this is the reason, right? So think about IP co-sell eligibility as part of your holistic growth strategy, but think about it very, very strategically early on, because these are the two things that will impact your readiness. And these are things that tend to slow down SDCs as they're already building the framework, building the foundational pieces to get prepared to start co-selling with AWS, that once they hit these two gates, it gets a little bit scary. But I don't want that process to happen. And it doesn't need to happen, because as long as you're internally aligned and you understand what's required from the front end and you build it into your motion and your strategy as you start maturing all these parts of your Microsoft business, think about these two gates. The engineering review. Obviously, the technical piece is important, right? A lot of SDCs want to make sure that they can sell their solution effectively. And the way that they can effectively sell their solution is to make sure that the solution itself is validated. And the engineering review is the most critical piece here. And I want to explain that here in a bit. So what I mean by that is, in the IP co-sell process, there is a sequence that you have to follow. And a part of that sequence is an actual validation, of which the Microsoft engineering teams want to see your reference architecture. They want to make sure that the quality of the integration and all the technical bits are there, that it is a sound solution, that it is compliant, right? They're checking to make sure that the environment, at the end of the day, is stable, it's packaged correctly, and that the listing is matching the environment, right? That has to be sound in order to be effectively sold on Marketplace, or even to co-sell that solution with Microsoft field reps. Now, the second part of that is the go-to-market side. I think this is the part that many SDCs also tend to rush, because SDCs don't realize, wait a minute, I think I need to work with my marketing team or my enablement team or other stakeholders to gather all of this information last minute, when really and realistically, You can be positioning, you can be creating, you can be doing a lot of things as you are kickstarting that partnership. And so that means from the very, very beginning, you are already thinking about how can I message my product to a Microsoft field seller so that they understand the value of my product and how it connects back to the Microsoft platform, the things that they understand, the things that they know, and the things that they care about, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're IP co-sell eligible, that means that you are prepared to co-sell with Microsoft field reps, and you are confident in your messaging, your positioning, that you have your customer references if they ask for it, that you're aligned to their sales teams, that you know how to work with them, right? And that there is a value add that you are working together in tandem with them, right? So these are readiness essentials. Think of these 2 gates from the very beginning as part of your holistic strategy, rather than thinking about it last minute just to enter it into Partner Center and get that IP co-sell eligibility. I'm going to deep dive here in a bit. So just to kind of, I guess you can say holistically, if you want to think about your maturity path and the way that it looks like as a software development company maturing, some of the things that we've learned so far is that software development companies that are doing this for the first time think of this in stages, and stages that could be sequential, but stages that are strategic, and stages that help them get to success much faster than thinking about this in different moving parts or in a siloed way, right? So the beginning always usually starts with getting listed. That's the basics part of this. Achieving IP co-sell eligibility is obviously part of that maturity path, as we've learned, being able to actively co-sell with Microsoft field sellers, having them incentivized to work with you. And then this is truly where your maturity path kicks off. Step number 3, when you're actually activating that co-sell pipeline, when you are starting to share more volume, more opportunities, more quality opportunities to Microsoft field sellers, because now they have the confidence that you can transact on Marketplace, that you know how to sell to Microsoft because you know how to speak their language, and that you have a framework, a flywheel, so to speak, that works for them and with them, and you have sustained this in a way that's repeatable, right? At the end of the day, the path to Microsoft maturity is no mystery. It just has to be done strategically and thoughtfully from the very, very, very beginning. And it's important that you do this correctly and that you think about this in a way that benefits the Microsoft field sellers as much as it benefits your own team from the very beginning. Because if you don't do this properly, Microsoft field sellers might not engage, and some of them might. So it really just depends on how prepared you are, because Microsoft field sellers at the end of the day have their own goals, their own targets, their own priorities, and they need to make sure that their accounts, that their own end customers are supported. So when you engage with them and when you are prepared to co-sell with them, once you have unlocked IP co-sell eligibility, you have to understand that it's not natural for them to work with you. They too have to understand the value of who you are and what you do. So think about the Microsoft seller just as much as you think about your own sales team. They have to understand quickly and very, very fast about you, so that way they can bring their account along for the ride of co-selling, right? They have to understand, is the solution that you're trying to co-sell with me, is it even complementing the Azure solutions I'm trying to work with them on? How can I explain this? How can I explain what your value is to my customer in the way that makes sense to them, right? Because if you clearly can't articulate the value of your own product or platform to your end customers, how will a Microsoft field seller be able to do that confidently to one of their accounts, right? So you have to always think about the Microsoft field sellers as you start co-selling with them, right? This is part of the process. You have to bring them into the fold. And is there any proof? Is there any success stories that you can provide a field seller? Because naturally, if they're working with you for the first time and don't know who you are, they would want to know, hey, do you have a customer you've already worked with before? And do you have an example that I can show the customer at hand of this success? Because in a way that gives them the confidence knowing that, even if I can't clearly articulate the value, at least I have proof for my end customer to feel confident that Microsoft plus this SDC are working better together, and repeating that over and over across multiple accounts, right? So in a nutshell, Microsoft sellers really care, and they do want to co-sell with you. And that's what IP co-sell eligibility is about. But you have to be very tender with it, because at the end of the day, not every Microsoft seller will give you the same attention. I'm not saying that they all will or won't, but you have to be very intentional about it. You have to make sure that you are catering to what they need. They have to know and have the confidence that whatever you're trying to pitch to them or co-sell with them, that it is technically aligned to Microsoft solutions, that the architecture of your platform is sound, and that it is running and operating on Azure's cloud. I know that sounds wild, but there are SDCs that are multi-cloud, and a Microsoft seller really doesn't care about the other hyperscalers, right? They want to know about Azure and making sure that it is drawing down Azure resources, right? Making sure that everything is consistent. Going back to the messaging, messaging can be very, very successful if you know how to speak to a Microsoft seller. Because if you know anything about Microsoft and the other hyperscalers, they have acronyms that we don't even know about, right? I'm even saying SDC in this session, meaning software development company. It can mean ISV, independent software vendor. At the end of the day, your messaging has to be very consistent with the Microsoft ecosystem, right? With their acronyms, so that their teams can bridge that gap into what you're trying to say versus what the taxonomy and the lexicon that they know, right? At the end of the day, it has to make sense. And if it has to make sense, it'll make it easier for everyone at the end of the day. And so really it's these things, and they're tiny little things, but it's these little things that make all the difference, whether or not you are an SDC that truly has done their homework and actually understands the Microsoft ecosystem versus one that just wants to do the checkbox and let it rip, right? At the end of the day, you have to be a part of the ecosystem that is Microsoft and become embedded with their teams. You have to learn how to speak their language. You have to learn how to speak their solution, technological language as well, and how your solution bridges the gap to their solutions, right? Doesn't seem very hard, but these tiny little things make the biggest difference. And just to kind of summarize some of the things over the last few years I've seen where there might be pitfalls that really delay a Microsoft field seller wanting to successfully co-sell with you, and not just that, but really also the overall structure of what is IP co-sell. I've seen instances in the past where there has been a software development company that has a VM solution, and actually the listing is a software listing. That is not good for IP co-sell, right? At the end of the day, your architecture has to match the listing, right? There's little nuances, things, clearly, technically things that will obviously cause a pitfall from the very, very beginning, but making sure that all these critical pieces are in line to make this process as seamless as possible. Same thing when it comes to some of the content, right? Don't put generic use cases, right? At the end of the day, if you're putting in a use case or case study that you have from your website into your IP co-sell content, and it has nothing to do with the value of Azure or doesn't talk about Microsoft or has no connection to really Microsoft, then don't use genetic information, right? That doesn't help your case. That's only going to delay some of these things, right? If your positioning has nothing to do with Microsoft, then of course a Microsoft seller is going to have a hard time understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve, right? At the end of the day, if you're uploading assets for them to ingest, to enable themselves on your content, and you're adding so much content, it could be hard for them to understand. Only upload the content that makes it relevant to them. I know that sounds simple, but think about your own sellers, right? You don't want to flood them with too much information. You want to get them enough information to be dangerous. And Microsoft field sellers are the same way. But in this case, it's very important that you only upload the things that are important for them. Anything else can wait, right? Anything else is not relevant in the ecosystem that they're living in. And another pitfall here is you can do all of these things right, and it could still delay your readiness with working with Microsoft if your own sales team isn't ready. You yourself, your organization can do all of these things very, very successfully. You can be prepared as much as possible. You can be technically hardened. You can have your go-to-market assets prepared perfectly. The messaging can be on point. But if your own internal sales teams, aka your field sales teams, don't know what to do after you've achieved IP co-sell, aka learn how to co-sell effectively with Microsoft, you're already delaying your readiness in getting success with Microsoft, right? So don't rush the process. Prepare in advance. Prepare strategically. Prepare your team. Don't think of this as an afterthought. Think of this as a strategic motion that you consider holistically for your business from the very, very beginning. So here are the 5 things high-performing SDCs do differently. Just to summarize, right? SDCs that have gone through this process before or are doing this for the first time now, if you've been paying attention, these are the 5 major things. If you've learned nothing from this session, if I can teach you these 5 things, then we've done something here. And that means 1, you know that your solution has clear diagrams showing that it complements Azure's infrastructure. That's step 1. Great. If you don't even have infrastructure on Azure, that's a problem, right? If you have multi-cloud, you need to make sure that it's all tying back to Azure consumption, right? Make sure it's clear. Number 2, align your narrative. Microsoft wants to make sure that what you're trying to sell vibes with what they're trying to sell. And that is the better together kind of messaging. It doesn't have to be complex. It just has to work, and it has to be clear. Number 3, present evidence, right? At the end of the day, you're nothing without evidence, without success, without seeing any real results. So if you already have seen success from the past, whether that is you are yourself a successful SDC that has consumed on the cloud and or has migrated or is doing things that are changing your way of working, right? With Microsoft, that is proving success. You are slowly changing the way you operate and you have evidence to prove that, you have performance metrics, then you are already on the path to success. It can be really hard to really work with Microsoft if you have nothing to show for it, right? That just goes without me saying, but at the end of the day, outcomes is what they're looking for. And you have to prove yourself before you are even able to co-sell with Microsoft, right? Sequencing. I've talked a lot about some of these sequence, right? I think I'm a person of order of operations. So when it comes to sequencing, making sure that you're following the order of operations from the very beginning is very important, right? Don't just wait till the very end to do IP co-sell. That's where you're putting the pressure on yourself. Operationally, think about this from the very beginning. Kind of like my Marketplace, right? You're not really supposed to ask your end buyer, hey, by the way, do you want to transact this deal through Marketplace at the end of the sales cycle? No, you typically have that conversation in your discovery. Same thing when it comes to co-selling. You want to co-sell in the beginning part of the sales cycle. You don't want to include a Microsoft field seller at the end of the sales cycle. This is very similar in a more systematic operational way. If you're getting ready to work with Microsoft, don't think about IP co-sell till the very end. Think about it in the very, very beginning. And that's why it's important to prepare internally, because even if you're an alliance or partner leader like me, there are other leaders in your organization that might not know this either. And they themselves have to understand that this is a motion that is strategic, that is across the organization. Bring your leaders in, your business leaders, to make sense of what this means for the company. This is truly will define your success. You have to have your leadership too behind your success. And if they lean in, that can only help make this process faster and smoother, because at the end of the day, you need all teams on hand to make this go fast and do it differently. I just want to segue and how Labra might do these things differently, right? Because at the end of the day, that's also why I'm here, right? Shameless plug, just kidding. The things that Labra and why I'm at Labra, I've done this for a very, very long time. And Labra is a provider that can help an SDC do this even faster. Now, I do want to preface this. When I say help, I mean operationally. And what Labra is Labra is a provider in the Microsoft ecosystem. We are an enabler. We have a platform and a service that can help SDCs get ready, get listed, become co-sell ready, to connect their co-sell activities, their engagements operationally through a system, whether that be their CRM into Partner Central. And a big difference for us is seeing that success and being your guide to everything I just kind of talked about, right? It's one thing to learn about this. It's another thing to do it in practice. And that's why Labra is here and why I love to work at this company, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do is help demystify and centralize a lot of this into our own offering. So what we do differently, we provide a programmatic approach to be able to help you guys navigate a lot of this, right? Because getting listed is one thing. You can do that alone. You can do it with a third party, or you don't even have to do it at all. But if you're really serious about maturing your business and accelerating, it's probably in your best interest to work with a marketplace enabler like Labra, who can do it all sequentially, who can guide you through the process, who can give you a platform, provide you the platform to centralize this. So that way you're not having to figure out how to do it in Partner Central, or if you're a multi-cloud party, how to do it with all the portals. That is only going to make growth even harder, right? So we're here to help you guys make the most out of your Microsoft partnership, demystify a lot of this information, walk you through the process, and even help you get IP co-sell eligible. Now, we can't guarantee that, obviously. That has to do with a lot of things we've talked about here, but we have advisory, we have guidance, we have PDM services, if you will, that can help you get through this process and not do it alone. That's the most important part about what differentiates us. We understand there's providers in the space that can get you listed. They can connect your CRM. They can maybe give you advice on how to become a better partner with AWS. We do that all in-house. And at the end of the day, we can do it across different hyperscalers as well. But naturally, we only care about Microsoft for this session, right? In any case, SDCs, we've seen them range from different industries, different backgrounds, different needs, different priorities, many of which all are trying to accomplish the same thing, becoming a better partner in the eyes of Microsoft, being successful, operationalizing these processes with a partner like Labra. So here's an example of some of the SDCs we have already enabled and have done this before. Now, I'm not saying that they're Microsoft enabled, but this is just an example of some of the SDCs we have supported throughout our life and time doing this, right? So at the end of the day, we are very holistic. We don't discriminate whether you're an SMB or an enterprise in a certain vertical. We're all following the same path, and that path is to success with Microsoft. And so one of the things too that I want to talk about is our SaaS co-sell accelerator program for Microsoft, or what we call SCAP M. Now, I just threw another acronym for you. This is not a Microsoft acronym. SCAP is Labra's acronym, SaaS Co-Sell Accelerator Program. And it's our primary bread and butter. I guess you can call it our bundle. But at the end of the day, it's our offering to help you guys, one, get listed, which we know is that requirement, hard requirement for the baseline of IP co-sell. Whether that means you're a company or an SDC that has a product-led growth strategy or a sales-led growth strategy, and you need those types of listings, we can support you on that. Secondly, we understand co-sell is an important part of this process. Co-selling can get messy. I did talk about IP co-sell and engaging with Microsoft field sellers, but in practice, you have to share those opportunities with them through Partner Central, and that is the hairy part. And that's where we can kind of come in and operationalize through a CRM integration that can help you automate that. Now, of course, that's dependent on Microsoft's APIs, and we don't have to get into that right now. But at the end of the day, we're here to help you do that more effectively so that you don't have to log into Partner Center. You can do it directly from a console or from Salesforce or wherever natively your business does their business, right? This is the differentiator here, the validation piece, the part that we've talked about. This is the tricky part, and the part that can get a little hard to understand when you are actually at this part in achieving IP co-sell eligibility, the reference architecture. Now, I'm not saying that we will create your reference architecture for you or deploy or migrate, none of that, but we do have in-house guidance where we can help your team understand whether or not your reference architecture would or would not pass the assessment of the IP co-sell process, right? You have to understand and know, is this even going to pass? We can help with that. We can guide you. Now, we can't change your reference architecture, but we can guide you and be ready. This is also the differentiator, right? Because we understand this is not going to be an easy process when you're actually doing it, and it can get confusing. And that's why we're here, right? At the end of the day, we have in-house resources that are providing that proxy PDM support, right? At the end of the day, providing you a dedicated resource before you even get one at Microsoft to help you achieve and unlock IP co-sell eligibility, to walk you through all of these best practices that I did, but in practice, in real life, to make sure that we are working with you to a level that by the time your business is ready to work with Microsoft, you are already prepared. Now, the best thing I want to say about what I've just talked about is, naturally, you're probably wondering, How much does this cost? I don't know. I'm not in sales. Just kidding. I'm partnerships. But Microsoft really believes in the value of partnerships, in the value of what Labra does, because we are a Microsoft enabler. And at the end of the day, our success is your success, is Microsoft's success, right? That's a triple win in our book. And there are dedicated programs now that I've seen for the first time for SDCs that are doing this, going through this journey for the first time with Microsoft. And if they're willing to do this journey with a provider like Labra, there is a very special program called the Microsoft Marketplace Rewards Pilot. There's no acronym for that, but there is up to 60K in sponsorship credits for SDCs to leverage and to be more successful. So that just shows you that providers like Labra and Microsoft are working together to make this process as seamless and as quick as possible for you guys, right? At the end of the day, it's all about being successful in the Microsoft ecosystem, as well as it is achieving outcomes for your business, right? And Microsoft is in charge of making that happen with this program and make it happen very, very quickly, as we can do it in less than a month, right? And so besides all of that, there are other things that we can support. That's just our bread and butter. If there's other things in your business outside of that that you want to evaluate, if you have custom storefronts, if you want to work with channel, if you have a channel organization, we haven't even talked about that, right? There are things that your business might need to support. If you need to resell a marketplace, if you need to automate certain things, if you need to build a groundswell on your operations on top of achieving IP co-sell eligibility, this here shows you just some of the things that we can support across that journey from a platform perspective, whether you have a channel-led growth strategy, an alliances-led growth strategy, or a product-led one. Now, I know I've talked a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you have several questions. So let's have some fun here. Post your questions in the chat, and let's see what comes up.
Thank you, Barbara. Great session. And I already see some questions coming in. So again, if you're joining us live and you have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat. We've got a few in the queue right now, but we'll try to answer as many as we can in today's session. So first question, what are the biggest signals Microsoft looks for beyond basic eligibility?
That is a great question. Biggest signals, preparedness and revenue, right? One of the things that we didn't really talk about in today's session, I would say, is revenue, because one of the requirements of IP co-sell eligibility is having a certain amount of revenue transacted through Marketplace, right? So even just having business on Marketplace is the first signal that I would say Microsoft generally looks at. Revenue, going back to my first slide, even though we talked about co-sell and that being the primary of what IP co-sell is, you do still have to have the attribution part of that. And that's you as the SDC having revenue transacted through the marketplace, which we know is 100K in Microsoft billed sales for IP co-sales. So that's the signal I would say Microsoft looks at.
Great, thank you. Next question, what should an SDC prioritize early to avoid delays later on?
Ooh, great question. I think to answer this question, I would think of kind of those two gates that I talked about, right? The technical gate and the go-to-market gate, right? If you're thinking about this for the first time, or if it's something you've already entertained, those are the two things right off the bat that you should be thinking about before you think of anything else.
Thank you. Next question, what types of GTM or go-to-market assets do we need to support co-sell? Are architecture diagrams required?
That's a great question. Yes, so reference architecture diagrams are required as a part of IP co-sell. That's part of the process. You have to upload your reference architecture. That's just one of the many documents. There's other documents that are required. Most of them are better together kind of things, but I won't reveal all the secret sauce, right?
All right. Next question. How do we get Microsoft sellers to pay attention to our offer?
That's a really great question. Kind of a complicated one too, because at the end of the day, Microsoft sellers are not paying attention. You have to drive that demand, right? And Microsoft sellers are account teams. They're very dedicated to their accounts and making their accounts successful. So you have to come to a Microsoft seller with a clear ask, right? You can't just flash your logo or try to get them to want to sell your product naturally, right? You have to have a viable opportunity. You have to go with them and talk to them about what it is you're trying to get from them from that opportunity. Do you want to know what their Microsoft current performance is? Do you want to know how or what their goals are for the next few quarters? At the end of the day, the way to interest a Microsoft seller is to pull them into their universe, right? Otherwise, they're not really paying attention. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you have to come with the clear ask. They're not going to come to you. You come to them. You come with them with the clear ask, and you come prepared.
Got it. Next question. What part of the IP co-sell process do most SDCs tend to overlook?
Yes, the reference architecture process, because I think they're only thinking about unlocking that eligibility criteria to be able to have the Mac eligibility, right? But they're overlooking all the technical bits, all the operational bits that we just talked about, right? And those are the strongest parts of this whole operation in the framework that's truly going to get them to the next stage. So technical hardening, I would say.
Do you have any tips on how we better align our sales motion with Microsoft?
Ooh, this is a great question. Yeah, tips, better sales motion. At the end of the day, it really just depends on the type of SDC that you are, right? And the industry that you support and the type of product that you have, right? So it all comes down to strategy and pinpointing that strategy in a way that translates across the Microsoft ecosystem. It's not a blanket strategy that you just cast the net and hope something sticks. You have to be very intentional. Think about Labra, for example. We're an SDC ourselves in the Microsoft ecosystem. We ourselves have to work with Microsoft field sellers, and we can't just expect all of them to know what Labra is or what we're not. At the end of the day, we have to pinpoint the exact teams, the exact accounts. You have to be very strategic. So you have to be very organized in the way you approach them as well and identify specific teams. That's my advice. Targeted approach, right? Not blanket approach.
Absolutely. Barbara, thank you so much. I think that we got to everybody's questions. So we will go ahead and end there. Again, if you're watching and you have questions after the show today, please post them in the Marketplace community discussion board. And the link is there on the screen for you to see. It's just aka.ms/community/marketplace. We've got a discussion board there with lots of questions related to Marketplace, every stage of the journey. We've got access to other events, other resources, and a blog as well with lots of great Marketplace content. So if you're not a member of that community already, definitely check it out. Barbara, thanks so much for joining us today. Any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to thank you guys in the community for having me. Also, thank you guys for the session. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and it can be confusing. At the end of the day, I am a passionate person, and so Labra is here to support you guys, and reach out to me as a member of the community too. If you have more questions, be happy to answer them and connect with me, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing, and that's see marketplace success, see co-sell success, see success with Microsoft. So thank you everyone for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barbara, and thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you can join the next community event, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you so much.